Hi, this is Lisa Velasquez from Fi-Med Management, and I'm talking now to Frank Cohen, who is a scheduled speaker at our Fi-Med RAC Summit coming up in April in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hi, Frank, and welcome to the Fi-Med YouTube channel.
Well, hello. Thank you very much, Lisa. It's good to be here.
Great. You're welcome. You're very welcome, of course. Frank, I just wanted to ask you about your topic that you're speaking about. You said you were going to talk about using analytics to conduct a pre-audit risk assessment and post-audit mitigation analysis. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, the pre-audit assessment is this. You know, it's very difficult to be able to plan properly. For example, you can't do strategic financial planning for your practice unless you have a way to project out accounts receivables and accounts payables and whatnot. But what people do is they don't look at the fact that audits, for the most part, are becoming inevitable between, you know, RAC and MIC and ZPIC and MIC and CERD and HEAT and all the rest of them. Pretty much every physician can count on the fact that over the next few years they're going to encounter some type of audit. What I'm trying to do in the first topic is show physicians how to use analytical models in order to be able to assess the potential risk or the probability of a risk of an audit to the practice based on certain benchmarks. For example, we'll use the CERT study and take a look at what the auditors are looking at for areas that are most likely to be overpaid for a practice or paid in error, where they come in and look at doing these types of recoveries. And that helps the practice then not only to understand the potential risk, but the exact areas where that risk may be the greatest, so they can do some prospective analysis of what's going on in the practice, and if there's a problem, fix it, and if there's not, simply prepare themselves.
Okay, I see. Well, can you tell us very briefly, why do you think that is so important for our guests to hear, keeping in mind that we're going to have a lot of hospitals attending this conference, and how would this be applicable to them?
Well, it's important because, like I said, auditing is, in my opinion, from what I've seen from an escalation standpoint, is pretty much inevitable in one form or another. And with regard to the hospitals that come, there's two areas to it. One is hospitals now are buying up and owning physician practices. I feel like this is deja vu when we're back in the 80s and the 90s, because all these hospitals are buying up physician practices. So the hospital now absorbs the risk of the liability if there's an audit situation. The second is that even though I'll probably be looking at more physician practice examples than inpatient examples, the analytical approach to it is exactly the same. For example, instead of looking at CERT, we're also going to look at the HPMP program, which deals with the inpatient stuff.
Frank, you're also speaking on a second topic. How is that different from the first one?
Well, the first one is actually in trying to assess what your risk is. The second one is after the audit, after you've been audited and the audit's been conducted, in many cases now what's happening is the auditors are using extrapolation. The reason is because there's a huge potential to recover significantly more dollars by using extrapolation than by just looking at face value of the claims audited. So in the second session, we're going to look at the three most important ways that auditors can intentionally or unintentionally bias the results against the practice. The first is to look at whether or not the sample that they took is really a statistically valid random sample, critically important. The second is, and we find this a lot, that they use the wrong point estimates, which increase the average overpayment amount per claim, which in an extrapolation can result in thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of additional dollars that the practice is asked to pay that they shouldn't have to. And the third part is actually looking at the extrapolation methodologies. So here's the key to it. There is absolutely nothing right now that incentivizes or disincentivizes an auditor to do the right thing. So the auditor can just randomly deny things, and then later, if those are overturned on appeal, it doesn't hurt the auditor, it just costs the practice. So this is a way to be able to nip that in the bud.
Wow, that sounds really terrific. Thanks again, Frank, for being on the program.
My pleasure.
This is Lisa Velasquez for the Fi-Med RAC Summit. I've been speaking to Frank Cohen from the Frank Cohen Group, one of our speakers at the summit coming up in April. And as you just heard, he will be speaking about using analytics to conduct a pre-audit risk audit risk assessment, and post-audit risk mitigation analysis. So register today and be sure to reserve your spot now by going to www.Fi-Med-RAC-Summit.com. And if you enter the discount code YTFIMED, that's YTFIMED, you can get $50 off any seat. But this is good for only the first 20 people who use the code. So hurry now and get your seat at a nice discount. And thanks again for tuning in to the Fi-Med RAC Summit channel.